As a rule, I don't look at trophy lists that come out before release. They're typically pure spoilers, with character and location names presented without context in a list. I say typically because this isn't the case for the 9 achievements added to Blasphemous 2 under the subheading Update Number 1 in Steam. The previously 9 unnamed and undescribed DLC achievements for Blasphemous 2 suddenly got names and descriptions, and they're not what you might think. There are no bosses or locations named, no NPC quest lines described or collectibles found, and they're not accompanied by a short one-sentence description of how the achievement was earned. Instead, the 9 achievements are each a numbered discipline with a title, and then a flowery bit of text that feels more at home in an item's lore than an achievement's description. This is just not what achievements look like. Previous achievements in Blasphemous have followed the typical format, and I've personally not witnessed much deviation from this format with other games. This begs the question, why are these achievements like this? Dear viewer, if you indulge a bit of an out-of-the-box theory, I think they're like this because they're a teaser for the upcoming Blasphemous 2 DLC, expected in fall 2024, which is any time now. Why, hello there, this is Editing Sean popping in because since I recorded this video and now when I am editing it, we have gotten new information that is going to add additional context to what I talk about in this video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop in with some interruptions such as this to give additional information that didn't exist when I was originally recording the script. So since I recorded the script, we have gotten the reveal that the DLC is called Mea Culpa and it is coming out on October 31st. And in addition to the Mea Culpa paid DLC, which is like $12, there's also a big free True Torment update for New Game Plus that adds a bunch of stuff to the base game, adds a New Game Plus mode, and a bunch of other features, which I will talk about more in a future video, but I just wanted to put that out here now because occasionally during the video I will be adding new context that the teaser provided us. Back to your video. I can't say if this means that these achievements aren't real or placeholders or what, but I would be surprised if these are the state of the achievements we end up getting in the Blasphemous 2 DLC when it officially comes out. If you're really adverse to any kind of potential spoiler, you might want to avoid this information, as at the very least they're teasing the contents of the DLC, even if it does so without names or locations revealed. But if you're okay with the equivalent of an official teaser or trailer, I think that's what these 9 disciplines described are, and in this video we're going to check out what they might be teasing. So wake up babe, new Blasphemous lore just dropped, and we're getting into it. I'm approaching this as a teaser for the DLC, which are meant to give a small dose of what the DLC is exploring, but with a limited or no context. When I look at pre-release information, I like to cast a broad net and explore the possibility space, not try to quote-unquote solve anything. So in this video I'll be looking at the limited perspective of what these achievements describe, as well as what jumps out to me given the context of the series at large, and the limited information we already have about the DLC. The achievements as seen on Steam are in Spanish, and I used a combination of DeepL, a translation from Reddit, and a friend's translation to get this text in English. As I go through the achievements in order, I will provide both the original Spanish text and my translation on the screen. These achievements describe the 9 disciplines. A discipline in an academic or ecclesiastical setting are teachings and conduct that are imparted from teacher to pupil, and this seems to be the case here. Broadly speaking, these 9 disciplines describe the process through which the pupil prepares and ultimately embarks on a sacred pilgrimage. My inclination is that these 9 disciplines do not map onto the major beats of the DLC content, that this describes something that happens prior to Penitente's journey in the DLC, and I will explain my reasoning as we go through the 9 disciplines. This seems to be confirmed at least in part by the teaser trailer, as we see the disciple or pupil who seems to have already completed the 9 disciplines in the teaser trailer. That being said, it doesn't mean that the 9 disciplines don't map at all onto the content of the Mea Culpa DLC, just that, at least for these purposes, we see in the teaser trailer someone who has completed these 9 disciplines already, as evidenced by their sword. but we will get into these details more over the course of this video. The first discipline is called the Silent Duel, and the description says, "At the dawn of the first day, the pupil and the teacher face each other in a duel, a combat where the teacher, with the serenity of one who accepts his destiny, offers his life as the last act of teaching." The first thing that jumps out to me is that it is a silent duel, which conjures thoughts of both our protagonist Penitente, also known as the Silent One, as well as the Brotherhood of the Silent Sorrow. The Brotherhood of the Silent Sorrow was an order of penitents dedicated to emulating the silence of the Father in Blasphemous 1, and the order that Penitente belonged to. Their HQ is the starting place in a major location in Blasphemous 1, and in the sequel its ruins become the repose of the Silent One, where Penitente was buried and where Blasphemous 2 starts. This silent duel could imply the duel is between a teacher and pupil both in the Brotherhood of the Silent Sorrow. This would make the ritual process described here very old, as the Brotherhood of the Silent Sorrow was massacred prior to the events of Blasphemous 1. It was not re-established as far as we know in the time of Blasphemous 2. Another possibility is that there was an order created to emulate the silence of Penitente, and that these disciplines were created by that order. Blasphemous 2 plays with the concept of history being distorted, forgotten, and mythologized during the 1,000 years between games, so this would play into that theme. While I like both of these possibilities, I'm slightly dubious just because in the teaser trailer, the pupil does talk, which isn't very silent of him.
Master, I feel the power you spoke of in my dreams.
So it may more so be the case that it is a duel where they are silent for whatever reasons. The second thing that jumped out to me was that the first discipline occurs on the dawn of the first day. I'm gonna get real dorky here, I apologize in advance. On one level, this Majora's Mask reference is a meme used in relation to anticipating something you're hyped for, like Blasphemous 2 DLC. But also in an interview I did with creative director Enrique Cabeza, linked up top and in the description, he shared that the story of Majora's Mask was an inspiration for Blasphemous 2, with its focus on an impending cataclysmic event. So I very much think it is also a nod toward that. Digging a little deeper with it, this could also be implying that these disciplines were done in anticipation of the birth of the child of the miracle. Beyond these references, dawn is symbolically important to the Blasphemous universe. Blasphemous 1 starts off with the anonymous quote, "It is not the sun rising, but our sins," a quote which was added in the Stir of Dawn DLC. The title Stir of Dawn was pulled from the poem The Spiritual Canticle by 16th century poet and priest San Juan de la Cruz. The poem describes the dawn of a spiritual awakening, like that which happens with Laudes in the Stir of Dawn DLC, and is a topic I talk about in great detail in my Blasphemous critique, and is linked above and also in the description below. This could allude to this process as a spiritual awakening in which this silent duel is a final sacrifice and end of the teacher's pilgrimage, as a catalyst for the beginning of the pupil's spiritual pilgrimage. And speaking of spiritual acts, holy shit, this was some of the dorkiest conjecture I've ever done based on an achievement description. God, I fucking love these games. The second discipline is embalming. The pupil will embalm the teacher's body. He will apply secret ointments, ancestral mixtures that preserve the flesh and defy the passage of time, ensuring that the physical legacy of the master endures. What stands out to me about the second discipline is the phrase "preserve the flesh and defy the passage of time." First, I want to differentiate this from incorruptible saints. Incorruptible saints in Catholicism are saints who died and their corpses miraculously did not decay, or at least not to the normal extent. In the Blasphemous series, this idea exists as well through the Saints of the Guardian Visages in Blasphemous 1, and Lesmes in the Confraternity of the Incorruptible Flesh in Blasphemous 2. I won't fully rule out the possibility of a connection between Lesmes and his Brotherhood, but embalming someone to preserve them is different from a miraculously preserved corpse, and so I'm personally leaning towards this being unrelated. However, defying the passage of time is a thematic throughline in the Blasphemous games, and in these disciplines is the recurring concept of preserving the teacher and his legacy. The third discipline is the weeping ceremony. The pupil will kneel next to the inert body, will shed tears that are collected in a lacrimatory, a small bottle that he will carry around his neck, symbol of his eternal mourning and devotion. A lacrimatory was a real-world vessel used in Roman and late Greek society to do exactly as the pupil does here, catch tears shed by mourners during funerary rites. Tears in the Blasphemous universe carry importance and power. The tears Penitente sheds upon killing enemies are described in Blasphemous 1 as those forbidden tears you shed by the merchant Candelaria, and are used as a currency. This lacrimatory could simply be flavor or could relate to the mechanical function of tears within the game. In either case, I think this could maybe be another nod towards the order of the teacher and pupil following in the legacy of Penitente, emulating his collection of tears. I do want to say here that I think after seeing the teaser that there's a much greater possibility that the relationship between the Penitent One and this order, especially with the disciples we see in the teaser, looks to be more adversarial, especially because we see a screenshot where they appear to be fighting. I still think it's worth keeping the idea of an order where they're sort of emulating the Penitent One as a possibility. However, it does seem to be more adversarial from what we can see, so I'm less sure about the exact nature of if these happen to be parallels or if this is direct intentional emulation. I have more to say about this, but I'll wait to get to some of the other disciplines as that will lead to more conversation regarding this topic. The fourth discipline is the Forge. In the warmth of the Forge, the pupil will forge his weapon. This artifact will not be only a tool of war, but a sacred receptacle that will house the embalmed body of the master, preserving his conscious soul. Alright, it's time to talk about Mea Culpa, the Guilty Blade. Alright, I'm gonna hop in here because Passion did not have the context to know exactly how the Mea Culpa fit into the DLC, and we have updated information. The thing I was most wrong about and that I thought most strongly prior to seeing the teaser was that the disciple would be creating the Mea Culpa, that this was like a new version of the Mea Culpa, and that is not true. As we can see in the teaser, he is holding a blade and it is most certainly not the Mea Culpa, but it is containing his master, and it is everything being described in these 9 disciplines. What I will let my past self go on a bit about is the history of the Mea Culpa from Blasphemous 1 and how it can tie into the sequel here, because I think there are some misconceptions about the nature of Mea Culpa that are worth clearing up, so I'll let my past self take care of that right now. In the Kneeling prequel comic for Blasphemous 1, the Scholar of the Miracle Desamparadas says that the Guilty Blade has been made again, implying that the Mea Culpa, which we see created in the opening cutscene of Blasphemous 1, was not the first, but I would conjecture also not the last. At the end of Blasphemous 1, Mea Culpa notably crumbled to dust upon Penitente killing the High Wills after completing its purpose. However, with the impending birth of the Child of the Miracle, there may have been reason to forge a new Guilty Blade, perhaps to follow in the lineage of the Silent One. If this is the case, it's interesting how in both instances a sacrifice seems to be required to create the Guilty Blade. The DLC could involve these steps in which Penitente himself is creating the Guilty Blade, but right now I'm leaning toward the blade being created by the pupil prior to the DLC and ending up with Penitente, but it's worth keeping both possibilities in mind. Alright, I'm back. The explicit sort of goal of the Mea Culpa DLC is to restore the Mea Culpa from Blasphemous 1. And what that's telling me here that is being done by Penitente over the course of the DLC. What I do think is still interesting and definitely worth keeping in mind are these continued parallels that we see being on the pilgrimage, having this sacred blade. The parallels are interesting, and I'm not quite sure yet because I don't think we have enough context, but it is interesting to see how this will play out into the DLC and how much these 9 disciplines may play into Penitente's own path, or if this is something just flavor for this disciple character who looks to be a major part of the DLC. So while I don't think anymore that the disciple reformed the Mea Culpa and reforged it here, I do think that it is worth noting that this is what the Game Kitchen put out as a bit of a teaser, and the fact that they're drawing these parallels, because I think it's saying something about our own process in reforming the Mea Culpa over the course of the DLC. The 5th discipline is the Vigil of the Closed Eyes. For endless nights, the pupil will watch by the weapon with the teacher inside, reciting ancient prayers of the Brotherhood. With his eyes closed, he will patiently wait to hear the teacher's voice, a whisper from the beyond who will guide his path. A few things stand out to me here. The teacher's guiding voice reminds me of Perpetua, who spoke to Penitente from beyond the dream to guide him towards the true ending in Blasphemous 1. This guidance from beyond the grave is similar, and I know I keep hammering this point, but also seems like another echo of Penitente's journey in Blasphemous 1 that has been mythologized and codified by this brotherhood in Blasphemous 2. The other thing that feels like a bit of a stretch, but is worth mentioning, I think, is that the closed eyes remind me just a bit of Chrysanta's penance of blindness, but it could be worth keeping in mind. The sixth discipline is the blood of the ancestors. The pupil will consecrate the weapon with his own blood, an act that symbolizes the indissoluble union between his lineage and the legacy of his teacher. The blood touching the sharp metal will seal an eternal covenant. In this discipline, we get more language around legacy and eternity, which to me just reinforces the importance of these elements within this process. Moving along, the seventh discipline is the judgment of the shadows. In a deep trance, the pupil will be judged by the spirits of old masters. These specters will challenge his wisdom and strength, subjecting him to tests only the worthy can overcome. Those who demonstrate their worthiness will receive the blessing of the ancestors. The first thought that comes to me here is how naturally this sounds like a challenge in a video game, and is maybe the best argument for these disciplines mapping onto content within the DLC. My other thought is that in Blasphemous 2 there is a procession of shadows featuring penitents that take Penitente to remote and hidden places, but I'm not sure if that ultimately will connect, but I'm still going to mention it. There is one more thing I want to mention regarding this discipline. While I think it's most likely that this disciple has completed the previous 8 disciplines and is on the 9th, the pilgrimage that we will get to soon, I do think it's possible that he's on the 7th one because of this line from the teaser.
I will overcome your tests. This I swear as long as my body casts its shadow.
This line about being tested does sound similar to this Discipline 7, the Judgment of the Shadows, in which he is tested by the ancestors. And considering how I just mentioned how it sounds kind of video gamey, it could fit in well with the content of the DLC if that part of this DLC includes something along the lines of the Judgment of Shadows. The 8th discipline is the Sealed Oath. The pupil will rub his lips with sacred ashes, accepting the mission revealed by his master. This sealed oath will be an unshakable commitment to his destiny. What jumps out to me here is that this oath is sealed with ashes on his lips, as it once again seems like it could relate to silence, like that implied by the silent duel of the first discipline. The 9th and final discipline is the pilgrimage. With the heavy sacred weapon in his hands, the pupil will undertake a pilgrimage. Each step he takes is a tribute to the legacy of the teacher, taking with him the memory and teaching toward its final destination. In episode 7 of the Blasphemous 2 Dev Diary series, lead animator Raul Vivar discussed a 4th weapon that shared the moveset of the War Sensor, another heavy weapon. Some iterations of the concept art for this 4th weapon looks very similar to the weapon, presumably the Guilty Blade, that Penitente is holding in Cabeza's Steam Deck tease. This weapon forged is described as a heavy sacred weapon, which fits well with the description given for the 4th cut weapon, which looks like it might be getting a second life in the DLC as the Guilty Blade. While the teaser has proven that the Mea Culpa is not the blade forged by the Disciple, this does bring up an interesting question about Mea Culpa's role in Blasphemous 2. The moveset and abilities of the Mea Culpa were spread across the 3 base game weapons in Blasphemous 2, and so I wonder if the function of the Mea Culpa in the sequel is now taken from this cut 4th weapon. Playthroughs of the Blasphemous games are referred to as pilgrimages, and it's possible that this is referring to the content that the DLC will feature. As someone who is also pretty positive we'll get New Game Plus with the DLC, it could also be a nod toward that. My friend Hideous Armor on Twitter, who helps me with Spanish translations and insight into Spanish cultural references, made the interesting suggestion that perhaps the New Game DLC content is about creating the Guilty Blade, and then New Game Plus is where you can use it from the start, and I thought that was an interesting idea. My own personal bias toward these disciplines being something that happens prior to the events of the game leads me to think that the final discipline reads as the beginning of the journey for the pupil. As with any good teaser, these disciplines raise more questions than answers, adding more fuel to the hype. And there you have it, new Blasphemous lore, what definitely feels like a cheeky teaser to me, found in the unexpected location of Steam achievements. The 9 disciplines of an unknown brotherhood in which the teacher is slayed by his pupil, giving the pupil a holy mission from beyond the grave, and then gets packed into a sacred weapon and taken on a pilgrimage in the hands of his student. There are plenty of possibilities for what it all means buried within the text, and I've given my thoughts, so now I'd love to hear yours. Now is the time for speculation, so leave a comment with your thoughts and hopes for the DLC based on what we've learned with these 9 achievements. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like as well, and be sure to subscribe to Lore Hunter for more Blasphemous content. Thanks for watching.